In August 1947, the British Raj dissolved into two independent nations, triggering a migration of over 10 million people. Families crossed newly drawn borders on foot, by cart, and by train to reach a state that had not existed a week prior. The political momentum behind this new nation was driven largely by one man, Muhammad Ali Jinnah. He managed to secure a sovereign territory through a relentless campaign of negotiation. However, Jinnah began his career on the opposite side of the partition debate. For years, he was a leading member of the Indian National Congress, lauded as a primary bridge between the subcontinent's diverse religious communities. The shift from his early role as a champion of a single, unified India to becoming the primary advocate for its division marks a significant evolution in his political strategy. This evolution began in the commercial districts of Old Karachi. Jinnah grew up amidst the noise of the city's ports and trade centers, developing a reputation as a quiet, exceptionally disciplined student. He was born here in this 3-story yellow building known as Wazir Mansion. It was a modest starting point for a boy who would go on to negotiate the sovereignty of millions. At age 16, Jinnah traveled to London to study law at Lincoln's Inn. He was the youngest Indian to be called to the bar, immersing himself in the study of the British legal system. In London, he adopted a foundational ideology that political change should be achieved through constitutional means, precise language, and the impartial rule of law. While other leaders in the subcontinent turned toward emotional populist movements or violent rebellion against colonial rule, Jinnah remained committed to the courtroom and the legislative chamber. In the struggle against British rule, Jinnah's primary instrument would remain the meticulous logic of a barrister's brief. When Jinnah returned to India, he established a legal practice in the city of Bombay. He quickly rose to the top of the legal profession, becoming one of the most successful advocates in the city's history. He was famous for his witty retorts and his ability to influence judges through dramatized, effective arguments. At the height of his success, he was earning a daily fee of 1,500 rupees, an enormous sum for the early 1900s. Jinnah used this professional stature to launch a political career within the Indian National Congress, which was then a largely non-Muslim body. During this period, he argued that independence required a united front. He believed that the combined weight of Hindus and Muslims was the only force capable of convincing the British to leave. In these early years, his legal brilliance was focused on one goal: maintaining the integrity of a single, independent subcontinent. However, as the end of British rule grew closer, Jinnah began to see deep flaws in the vision of a unified state. Broken political promises and communal friction started to erode his confidence in the alliance. Jinnah analyzed the demographic reality of post-British India. A unified democracy would leave the Muslim minority vulnerable to the majority's voting power. This mathematical imbalance meant a permanent electoral lockout. Constitutional protections would be impossible to enforce if voted away by the majority. This realization led to his consequential pivot. He joined the All India Muslim League and helped pass the Lahore Resolution, which formally demanded a separate state for the Muslim community. Jinnah treated the Pakistan movement like the most important legal case of his life. He outmaneuvered the British and his political rivals not through force, but by using their own constitutional rules against them. For Jinnah, the demand for a separate state was the only logical way to ensure that his people were protected by the law, rather than being subject to the will of a demographic majority. On August 7, 1947, Jinnah's airplane landed in Karachi. The years of negotiation had ended in a sovereign victory. He was greeted by thousands of people who had waited miles to see him. The boy from Wazir Mansion had returned to his birthplace as the first Governor-General of Pakistan. After a decade of rigorous debate, Jinnah successfully secured a new territory for his people. But the final challenge was defining the character of the nation he just brought into existence. On August 11th, Jinnah addressed the Constituent Assembly to lay out his blueprint for the future. He surprised many by calling for an inclusive, impartial democracy rather than a purely religious government. He guaranteed absolute religious freedom, clearly telling the assembly that citizens were free to go to their temples or mosques and that the state would treat every individual as an equal citizen. Jinnah died 1 year later, having spent his final strength securing the state's constitutional foundations. Ultimately, the nation Jinnah built was the final application of his legal principles, a sovereign attempt to establish a jurisdiction where the law, not the majority, held supreme authority.